Hey guys, so today I'm gonna first of all, excuse my voice, man. I've been losing it. This Kansas crud, whatever I got, it's kind of moving into my throat, my chest, and stuff. But anyway, I'm gonna show you how to. I want to do a little video on showing you how to put an antler handle on your ferro rod. If you happen to get a ferro rod blank from somewhere, just gluing an antler handle on the end of it. I've messed around a little bit with this. At first I used to use like a two-part epoxy, and I didn't have real good luck with that. It seemed like after a while they loosened up and came loose. Now the glue that I use seems to hold pretty good. You can get it loose, but you have to put it in a vise and use a channel locks or something to twist it out of there. So I'm going to show you kind of how I go about putting an antler handle on the end of your ferro rod. A couple little tips and tricks or whatever that I use to try and just make 100% sure that the two are going to mate together, 100%, and we'll get started. This is an article I did. It got published in Self-Reliance Illustrated magazine. So some of you guys don't get that magazine, and so I just figured I'd share with you what I do. So we'll get started. Okay guys, as you can see, my workbench is pretty messy. It's basically controlled chaos. But I've got a little bit of spot here that I can work. I like to use a vise. All my stuff, or a lot of my stuff, is just kind of stuff I've gotten from garage sales, so you don't really need anything too high-tech for this, obviously. I've got some drill bits, a drill, and once again a grinder that I got from a garage sale. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even have an on-off switch. You plug it in to make it work, and that's it. So the first thing I do is I'll grab my ferro rods here. These are all 5/16. I've got one that's a little bit longer than the rest, but today I'm going to concentrate on some 5/16 rods. So this is my 5/16 rod, and this is the antler that I have to deal with. So I'm just going to start pulling out antler and seeing what looks nice with these ferro rods. So I'm going to set the tripod up, and I'll try to show you how I compare the rod to the antler. Okay, well, I dug through my box of antler, and this is what I came up with. Just these various size antler tines, and I'm just going to kind of compare the diameter of the 5/16 rod to the antler. Now you can see this one, there's enough material, hopefully you can see this, there's enough material all the way around the rod that I feel comfortable that this would make a decent handle. It is a little bit big. I'd like it to be a little bit small, so I'm going to put this one down for now. This one for me is just about ideal. Hopefully you can see this. So plenty of material, and I may cut this in half, or I may have to go a little bit more than half to make a decent handle. I don't like my handles extremely large, but you do need a little bit, enough to hold on to. So that's definitely going to make one. This one will make, a little bit of a curved one. That's okay. Sometimes that's kind of cool. So I'm thinking I would cut this one. I get a pencil here. I'm thinking that I would cut this one about where my thumb is. So I'm thinking I would want to cut that right about there. And with this 5/16 ferro rod, I only want it to go in maybe 3/8 of an inch at the most. I think that's plenty to seat inside your antler. So that'll make one. And I may even make that a little bit longer. It's always good to cut your antler a little bit longer just in case. You can always take a little bit more off. So we'll kind of pair them up. And this one, like I said, now with this, you can see how it tapers. I'm going to make the back end, the handle end. And so, as a matter of fact, there's a nice little mark right there. That looks perfect to me. I'm going to put it right there. So I'll cut this piece off and use it for something else, and then that'll be my handle for this one. So I'm just going to keep mating the antlers up with the ferro rods, and when I get to cutting, I'll get back with you. Okay, to cut this antler, I'm just going to use this portable bandsaw. My friend let me borrow this. I used to cut them with a hacksaw. A hacksaw has nice fine teeth, and you won't chip your antler. And especially at the end, at the very end of the cut, if you're using a hacksaw, you want to go very lightly and very gently. Otherwise, you'll chip your antler. One different style too that I'll show you. This one, sometimes people like just the tine and the whole tine to be on the ferro rod. So, or I'll take that back. It's this one I'm going to do that with. Some people like a whole tine to be on the end of the ferro rod. So I'll cut this, kind of clean this up a little bit, and it'll be a tine for the handle. So turn the saw on and get cutting. Okay, on to the next step. Okay, so I just clamped my piece of antler in my vise here, and I used just a random rag or whatever just to kind of hold it to make sure the teeth wouldn't mar the antler. I've got it in there pretty good. The only bummer with this method, excuse me once again, sorry, geez. The only bummer with this method is you can't see if the antler is bent, then you can't really see where your drill bit is going, and you want to be real careful that you don't, obviously go through the side or something. Another method to this, if you're having trouble seeing where the drill bit should go, would be just to take a pair of channel locks and kind of hold on to it, because when it's in your hand, you kind of have a little more of a feel for it. And actually, I used to just hold them all the time, even just with my hands and not the channel locks. But you can kind of peel this away and kind of eyeball it a little bit. I'm going to put mine in my vise just because I feel semi-confident I can do this. I've been doing quite a few of them, and hopefully I can line it up fairly decent. Now I can just eyeball this and tell approximately how deep I'm going. But a trick that I've learned over the years is, if you want a specific depth on your drill bit, let's say, like I said, about 3/8 or so is pretty good. Take a piece of electrical tape or some sort of tape and mark it how far you want to drill it. And then just bend it over on itself and make it like a little tag. And when this is spinning, you'll be able to see it pretty good. I marked it a little deep there because I don't want to go quite that far, but you can check it against your ferro rod. So it's seated about that far. about that far. And that's plenty for me. So we've got a nice beginning here. So I'll go on to the next one. Just gonna grab it. I want the shallow end. One thing too, if you're not good about knowing exactly where the center is, you can use a pilot bit. And actually I used to do that quite often, especially if you don't have a lot of material on the edges to work with. You can use a pilot bit and get like almost dead center of your antler. There is a drawback with that though, because this antler is very brittle, and as you start to go up in the size of the drill bit, it will catch once in a while. The trick is to make your pilot bit and then kind of wobble your drill inside the hole to ream it out a little bit before you go to the next size up. Okay, all this material that's going flying everywhere, it's a good idea to save some of that, because if you do drill your socket too deep, you can pack this into the bottom of it and it will take up space for you. So we'll check the depth of this one. It's a nice little size right there. Okay, I'm going to drill the rest out and I'll get back with you. Okay, the next thing I like to do, well, first of all, that's them at the rough stages. All the sockets have been drilled and they're all mated up with their antler pieces. The next thing I like to do is to drill the lanyard hole for them. So before I glue it or anything, before I do any more shaping, I'll just drill the lanyard hole, and I'll just hold on. I'll hold on to the ferro rod with a pair of channel locks or something. Like, my thumb is still a little bit sore, so I want to be careful and not re-injure it, but you can use a pair of channel locks or something and hold on to it. One thing I do want to show you is this one right here. Now, for me, this one doesn't look 100%. The lines are off on it. It looks to me like it should have been more to the left a little bit. So what I did is I reamed the hole out, and now, and maybe it's just me, but I don't like that look. I do like that look. Okay, so it's just a little bit of a gap in there, and I'll be able to put some of that material that I saved in there with the glue, and if I put it in my vise correctly, it'll keep that line together. I mean, I don't care for the ones that they look all crooked and they're just not mated up very good. So anyway, that's a way to fix that if you need to. So I'm just going to drill the lanyard holes out. I don't use too big of a drill bit. I don't even know what size this one is, but you can mate it up with, what does it say here? It's a 3/16, but you can mate it up with whatever you're going to use for a lanyard, whether it be shock cord or paracord or whatever. Normally I'll use shock cord, but I'll just kind of grab a hold of it. It's okay to push a little bit hard at the beginning, but once you start to feel it get more than halfway, you're going to want to lighten up on your drill bit. That way when you go through it, when you go through the antler, you're not going to break out the other side or chip the other side. just went through. Now you can see how it's a little rough on that side if you just go through with the drill bit. And very carefully, just kind of give it a little bit of a ream there, and then it's good. And if you find that it's rough at the very end, you can just take a little bit of sandpaper and kind of sand it up. So I'm going to go through and change the battery on my drill, but drill the lanyard holes out on these. Now this one, on this particular model, I don't like a lanyard hole in it personally. If somebody wants a lanyard hole in it, you have to kind of come up the antler a bit. So I don't generally put an antler or a lanyard hole on these unless somebody wants it. Anyway, I'm going to drill the rest of these out and I'll get back with you. Okay guys, well I've got all the lanyard holes drilled and I'm ready to shape it a little bit more. Now I have this grinder here, and this is a coarse wheel and this is a fine wheel, and I'm going to start with the coarse one. I just like to, this is a little bit of a sharp edge here, and I just like to make everything just a little smoother, and there's a little bit of a point right there. I don't want anything in my hand. I mean, I use my ferro rods quite a bit, and I don't want anything in my hand to make it uncomfortable. I just want a nice smooth fit for it. So I'm going to start the grinder up, kind of grind up the rough edges. Also, I'm not Mr. OSHA guy or anything, but this antler smells pretty bad when you do this. So you might want to wear a mask. I'm sure all this dust probably isn't good for you in the long run, but I guess I'm not really that worried about it. So grinding it with that rough wheel left a little bit of a rough edge right there. So now I'm going to take my fine wheel and get rid of that. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of these and I'll get back with you. Okay, so I've got all the antler pieces all shaped and holes drilled, everything. So these are pretty well set. They are a little rough on the lanyard holes like I was talking about. I'll touch that up after I'm all done with the ferro rod. I might even take like a little razor knife or something and just kind of cut it, or that light sandpaper. The only problem with the sandpaper is you'll scuff up this natural finish of the antler. So at the very end, when we glue it, some of the glue the next day will bubble up out of this socket, in between the socket and the rod, and I'll just take a razor knife and just trim that away, and at that time I'll use that razor knife to clean this up. So this is the next step, what I do. Make sure I got all the ferro rods kind of out of the way. So I know approximately the depth that I did the hole, and it doesn't hurt to go a little bit further with this step because the coating needs to come off for the ferro rod to work anyway. So this is what I'll do. I'll just take my sander here and sand this coating off. Okay, so this is what it looks like. I want to do a decent job. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I do want it decent. So now I'm going to turn the camera around. I'll do all the rest of them later or whatever, but I'll turn the camera around and I'll show you what else I do to these rods just to make sure that they stick in the antler as good as possible. So now I'm going to take my hacksaw and just cut some notches in it. Okay, try to get a close-up of this. So that's all I'm doing to the end of that ferro rod. I think that does help me a little bit with keeping that ferro rod inside that antler. That's what I do anyway. So I'm going to do that to the rest and we'll get back with you. Okay, well here's all the ferro rods ready for the antler handles. And what I'll do is I use Gorilla Glue, and I'll show you that here in just a second. Actually, I'll show you right now. So just standard Gorilla Glue. And this product says to add a little water to the two pieces that you're trying to glue together. So I'll just take a little glass of water and, fill the socket with some water, dump it out, and then maybe even wet the ferro rod a little bit. And then I'll add the glue to the socket. If you add it to the rod, it seems like the antler will scrape it off and not as much glue will get down into the socket. So I'll put just a nice ring of glue around there, and then I'll put it in a clamp like this. I only have 2 clamps, so I can only do 2 at a time. One thing with the Gorilla Glue is it does expand, so you don't need quite as much as you think you do. And as you can see here, it's starting to leak out through the bottom here, which is totally fine. That's actually, I want that. And then that's what I was talking about before, is I'll take the razor knife and just clean that up. And antler sometimes is very porous, depending on how old it is. And you can see some of it's even coming through the lanyard hold. But that's okay. It's just going to totally fill that porous void in there with glue. So there you go. Nothing earth-shattering or anything like that, but I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, guys.